Welcome to the Biz Bruja podcast, where we are reclaiming our powerful intuition, our sacred medicina, embracing our magic and uncovering and healing ancestral patterns so we can powerfully create our own well-being, our lives, families, community, and our soul businesses. Hi everyone, I'm Vanessa Codorniu. I'm the creator of this blogcast, the Biz Bruja herself, a modern-day bruja, a priestess, a fourth-generation psychic medium. I'm a bilingual Argentine-American who started reading adults at 16 and became a professional intuitive at 22. And I now guide creatives, leaders, intuitives, and healers to break through fears, release ancestral patterns, tap into sacred medicina, and the practical power of our intuition so we can serve the world with our sacred gifts. I'm a healer of healers, a teacher of teachers, and where psychics and leaders come to develop and thrive. It's been a deep honor to hold space for the next generation, and I look forward to guiding even more as I continue to share my online school, the School of the Soul Artes. I've taught my 9-month programs such as the Urban Priestess Mastery, Awaken Soul Biz, Intuitive Leverage, my 8-week Intuition Boot Camp, and Vida Alineada en Español for the last decade. I'm literally one of New York City's best-kept secrets, with more than 10,000 psychic sessions, with hundreds of students in the U.S., Europe, Latin America, even Australia. As a Bruja oracle, clinical hypnotherapist, astrologer, soulful business coach, and sacred circle holder. I'm not an elder yet, but I'm getting there. It's been decades of really stepping on this path, walking my talk, and now I'm going to the next stage, owning and claiming my Bruja Queen, and I invite you all to own yours wherever you may be on the journey. Now, my sacred work, I've done a lot of one-on-one work. I've done groups. I've done online sessions. I've taught at retreats, at leadership centers, and leadership conferences. I've even worked with kids and men for the last decades. I've especially worked with young women leaders in the last 9 years, creating leadership circles around inclusivity, honoring and healing the sister wound, bullying, diversity, and valuing our own visions and voices. In short, this is my life's work, period. Now, I felt called to create the space for my own healing, for the healing of others, and for the cooperation towards a more collaborative and down-to-earth spirituality. In the last almost 8 years I've been online, I've seen so much consumerism, appropriation, and even a whitewashing of sacred and ancient beliefs. This is all the rage now. My question becomes, how do we find a way to reclaim our own practices? How do we honor our own pathways, our own intuition without getting caught up in the outside world around us? And this is the exploration I've been on since I was a child. And that's the powerful space that I hold for my people. Now, I cannot wait to share some of these people that I've been speaking to on my podcast. I honestly call them my hermanas. As an immigrant who arrived in the United States, I've been straddling 2 languages, 2 culturas, different spiritualities, religious beliefs. I mean, really, many, many more. Because for any of us who are from Latin America, we're a mix of indigenous, European, African cultures, and many others. And if you're from New York or any big city, there's just so many culturas within culturas, right? I mean, and we can say the same for our Asian brothers and sisters, our Black brothers and sisters. There's so many layers of culture and understanding that we need to allow and create dialogue for. Whew. And so there's just so much here for all of us, so many layers. And so here we are, all of us at this intersection, straddling duality of being spiritual and being in a body of a particular race or culture and managing what that means in the world. Now, we're all in this together. If you found this podcast, know that you're in the right place. Have patience with me because this is only my 3rd episode and I'm just learning and developing. My heart's in the right place and I want to hold space for each and every one of us to continue to drop our cloaks of invisibility and to claim our true sacred heritage. Now, here we will speak what feels like truths, right? For everyone and my guests. And so I guess just wanted to remind us that my guests' opinions will not always reflect mine. And I want to hold space for the dialogue that includes many different opinions, right? Because otherwise life would be pretty boring if we didn't have different perspectives to explore and we didn't agree to disagree. So I'll be sharing many different perspectives over time and opinions and ways of being. Now for today's episode, I'm so excited to introduce Milada Sakic. Hello, everyone. Welcome. I am so excited to be here with an incredible star sister, with my star teacher and mentor and just powerful colleague, Milada Sakic. Welcome, Milada.
Thank you. Welcome. Thank you very much.
And
Excited to connect and be here.
yes, and I have to share with the audience, Milada is just like the real deal, heartfelt, powerhouse, foundational, and evolutionary sister that you want by your side, no matter what you're dealing with. She's primarily known as an astrologer, a business astrologer, a financial astrologer, a business mentor, a teacher, a guide. But I can say that by taking classes with you and receiving some of the wisdom that you've dropped with me, it's not only affected my business and my visibility, but it's also affected my love life. We were talking about that earlier. It's affected just my own acceptance of all that I am. So, Milada, just welcoming you with open arms and so much love. And as we begin
Thank
today,
you.
we'd love to hear from you a little bit about, who you are and how you got started on this path and what makes you tick.
Now we're talking.
Yes.
So thank you very much. It really, truly is an honor to be here. And maybe not, the audience cannot see now, but I'm sending a big hug here. And Vanessa, and so really excited to really be here sharing my heart and really what has brought me to this point in my life as well. And I understand we're going to chat about 2020 a little bit as well. So thank you for this warm welcome and inviting me here. So, really, it has been a journey, which, I'm sure for many of us, for you as well. And I, huge appreciation for you as well. And really lots of love back to you as well. And I find, we have several, not patterns, but really elements, I feel, of our life story that really resonate in many ways, which really is not a surprise. So I can really say that astrology has been my life. Really, I've been living and breathing astrology in many ways. It has been a journey since I've been really young. I started with reading tarot and numerology fairly young. I remember my grandmother encouraging me in very specific ways, my mother as well. And then when I would go for like a summer vacation and summer holidays, which I did not even realize at the time. And she was a psychic, and pretty much women would come to her for advice, and basically, like, she would read all kinds of things, like from coffee, to even like beans, and use her own psychic gift. And she would cook food, and women would be constantly like in and out. It was pretty much like a community. I didn't really, obviously,
Was this in Canada, or was this in Canada?
This was in Croatia. So I'm originally from Bosnia, Sarajevo, Bosnia. So this is the ex-Yugoslavia, one of the countries of when Yugoslavia basically separated in all of the different states. So Croatia was closest to the Mediterranean Sea. So actually my maternal grandmother and with my grandfather, so they lived on an island in Croatia. And this is where I spent a lot of summer holidays. So I'm mentioning her, even though I was named by my paternal grandmother, who was called Milada, as well, because for some reason my maternal grandmother has been constantly coming forth, and I've been really thinking a lot about even some of the things that in the past I was not really fully understanding in terms of her own life, in terms of what she had to deal with, in terms of then what my mom had, really pretty much had to obviously, live through that as well. And then how that's been, you could say, really brought forward through our lineage as well. And so I've been singing a lot. So when you say, what basically has been on my mind and heart as of late. I've been singing a lot, and it's been so I haven't listened to the actual like music on my. I think we even like removed for some reason. We put it in a different room because I haven't been listening to any other like CDs or DVDs or whatever, right? iTunes. And so anytime I start singing, it's like literally I can, in that moment, it's been like on a daily basis, my grandmother has been coming through very strongly. So it's been pretty much diving into the world of astrology and, you know, the cosmic cycles, and obviously doing a lot of teaching, and, you know, there's a lot of content creation and then weekly support. And that really is really the core of my life. I mean, my family is a big part of that. Here with my husband, our son actually lives with us probably for maybe a little longer, and we'll see. He's already 25, and I have a almost 24-year-old daughter as well. So she's just Sagittarius. So she has been on her own actually with her boyfriend, and pretty much following her own goals, and just recently graduated with a diploma in criminal justice. And so family has been a big part of you know, really keeping close with really what really matters the most to me. And yet you know, in many ways, it's been about also discovering who I am, and then also healing the layers, because I realized how important, you know, my own healing, and I didn't really get that fully, how important my own healing journey, and really truly understanding, right, some of these things that we've inherited from our moms and grandmothers, some of these patterns, how if I don't begin to understand and shift that, how I am effectively basically right passing that on to my, you know, my daughter, and potentially my son as well, and then, you know, grandkids by doing that. So
I'm so glad that you brought that
knowing
up.
myself, and yeah.
I'm so glad that you brought that up, because that's like at the core of a lot of the work that I know you do, that I do, where we get to that. What is it that we're passing on? What is our sacred gift, right? How do we contribute? How do we heal? How do we release? And in your journey, what are some like ancestral challenges that you've had? And what are, let's say, some ancestral gifts? You already shared some about your psychic grandmother and the cooking and the women and the sharing and the astrology and all that support, which is really beautiful. I was also supported by my family to learn things, not to take it out into the world, mind you, right? Like learn it, you could be private about it. But one of the things that I did was break through those barriers of, ooh, be careful, you don't want to get out there. And so what are some of your challenges and ways that you've embraced your gifts and your healing?
So thank you. Yeah, it's been a journey, and I didn't, you know, this would have been even more recent in the last 2-3 years. I want to say probably since the Me Too, that was transformational for me in many ways, in terms of just really coming to terms, in terms of how at some point, even though if we have had traumatic childhood, or if we have lived through a war that, you know, took us 20 years, you know, talking about myself, to even begin to even comprehend as to why and what, and talk about that, you know, we have to find our own way to speak up, and yet at the same time to really deeply understand the patterns that we're working through, because we can, you know, talk about trauma, or we can talk about, you know, the grandparents and what they've lived through, but there is a common thread. So one of the you know, there are several of them, but what I've identified, and really what I've been as consciously as I could been working through, is realization that martyrdom has been hugely impacting. I know, especially again, my maternal grandmother. I want to say paternal as well. I mean, they were both very creative. They were, interesting enough, both dressmakers, but the maternal, and they were known for that as well, but the maternal grandmother started working when she was 11 years old. She was literally sent away from her home, from this island, to this basically, you know, a bigger city, like 3 hours away from home, you know, where you had to travel with a ferry. And she was always the shortest as well. And so she was sent away from home to work, and with, you know, as a nanny and a babysitter at 11 years old.
Wow.
Where she would, it's just a story. I'm sharing this because this is a story that really got me to many times. I come back to that and then see, oh, this is how the workaholic attitude, right? Or that pattern, right? How that's been coming through as much as I've tried to say, oh, maybe I'm not a workaholic, like the family is important and, everything else, work-life balance. But really the truth of the matter is for 16 years working in a corporate Canada here, I was pretty focused on making sure that I, produce the best work, that I prove myself as much as I can, help as many people as you can. To a burnouts later, still kicking and screaming, back in 2010, even to 2012, I still wasn't coming to terms to the fact that I am going to have to make a change professionally, that I may not wait until I'm 65 to follow my passion full time, because at that point it really seemed like I was going to be, just doing, like, astrology was going to be like a side thing, right? Like I know many of us have either started that way, or maybe some people are still feeling like that's the way. And that's really how truly I thought, with my Virgo rising and Taurus sun and wherever else was going on there, that was the best way to provide for my family, stay in the corporate until I retired. And then maybe then, right, we'll see what happens. If I still have energy, I will do my spiritual work. But the universe obviously had a different plan. So again, I had to come to terms to some of these patterns. To me, it wasn't so much about contemplation. I wish that I could get to this understanding by contemplation. A lot of it, comes sort of in retrospect, is realizing that being driven is great. But are we really living in alignment with our purpose? Like, is that really what I want to be doing for the rest of my life, right? Like, if I had one burnout, 2002 and then 2012, like, how many burnouts do I need to have to really say, I mean, it was so bad.
Yeah.
Like, it really emotionally and, in many ways impacted me. That
it takes a lot for Taurus to burn out.
Exactly.
Might I add, it does take a lot for Taurus to burn out. It was like a decade.
That's true.
Yes.
That is absolutely true. So it took a while to realize that there was, certain things needed to shift, that, I can try and create a relationship crisis or some sort of other crisis in avoidance of, right, or a health crisis, right? In avoidance of actually saying, Milada, like, do you really think this is what you're meant to do for the rest of your life? As helpful as you are, as impactful as you have been, as I grew into, from operations to customer service to then managing human resources, which was like the closest to what I could find, right, in corporate, that basically is, to the work that I'm doing right now, helping people to develop and, coach them and so on and so forth. But you get to the point where, again, you're going to get signs, and you're going to realize that there is a bigger path than we may really be allowing ourselves. And so understanding what these patterns that we're that are really, transmitted through generations, and then realizing perhaps the buck needs to stop with me on some level to the best of our ability, right? So that I don't need to be a martyr, right, to the work. I don't need to be a martyr to my family. I don't need to be a martyr to,
even my
children.
My children. You could be a martyr to anything.
Yeah.
Your dream.
And exactly. So, and then if the pattern is because the patterns I've learned are helpful,
yes.
They want to help us. There is a huge gift that is such as, the gift of empathy, the gift of, even, really just a deeper relationship with life, and even deeper desire to help women. They're there to help us. It's just that how are we going to work with that, and how consciously? It really makes a difference, and how to put that in service of really getting as close to our alignment with our purpose as we can.
I
So
love that. I love that. Thank you for sharing that. And we're definitely, for anybody who's listening, dropping in, we're definitely going to talk about 2020 because we are actually recording this on the full moon in Gemini, the last full moon of the year.
yes,
So it's
yes.
an exciting time and it was done on purpose. And I want to just ask you, it just came to me right now. So humor me if you can. And I know that astrology is multi-layered, but if somebody who's, let's say, curious about astrology were to look at their chart in general, where in general, and I know again it's multi-layered, will we find like ancestral patterns, like, or just,
In our chart.
yes,
Yeah. So, I mean, great question.
just in general. I
And
know it's
so,
probably many different.
yeah, no, there are. I mean, there are some, and I've been spending a bit of time, especially in the last 2-3 years, really looking at that as well and how helpful it is. So the moon is very important because it is connected to really that closest, I would say, to the energy of our soul. I mean, it's multifaceted, right? There are multiple soul expressions that we are really bringing forth in this lifetime. Obviously it could be different, from lifetime to lifetime, but that frequency, the vibration of that lunar energy, right, of our moon sign. But obviously it's not just the moon sign, right, because there will be modifiers to that based on the house it is in, based on any aspects that the moon makes. But it's, from a fundamental perspective, important to understand, because that particular, if you like, the ancestral pattern that's connected with the moon sign. So if you just look at the sign to simplify, is probably the most closely connected to our own emotional well-being.
Yes.
And our own needs, our own core needs, that if we don't meet those needs as we grow up, right? Because it points to potentially any of those unmet needs. And, most of us have had them one way or the other, even if we had the most perfect childhood. And I oftentimes will talk about this, how, it's going to depend on the nurturing needs of our parents and, their own sun and the moon, because we tend to nurture people in our life, including our kids, including our, even, anybody that, that we are a guardian of, right? Including even our partners, right? Even we basically share this even with our clients and so on and so forth. Pretty much anybody that we would have that more of a, you could say, familial relationship with, or even some sort of nurturing, right, where we're holding space. We tend to nurture others based on our own moon sign, or we tend to hold space, or really, process emotions based on our moon sign. But people really need to be nurtured based on their own moon sign.
Yes.
So understanding that if I'm an Aquarius moon, right? So really very freedom oriented. I need spaciousness, in order to, I need time and space to process emotions. And if I am nurtured by somebody who, right, if my family loves to huddle, or if my parents or grandparents, tell me everything, and it wasn't necessarily the case, but it can be problematic if we don't understand our own needs, right? Yeah. Now, the fourth house also plays very importantly in a different context. The fourth house, the energy of the fourth house when it comes to ancestral patterns. And then also Pluto, interestingly enough, also, and even you could say more collectively. So the ancestral pattern that's actually relevant for our generation.
Wow.
Although important to keep in mind that it's still, our moon is so fundamental, and even, the fourth house, when we know our time of birth, important, because the fourth house really is the key to our inner being. I know it's the home and family and all of that good stuff that it represents in astrology, but to me, it really is the really multi-layered connection to our inner being and really our ancestral self, which is the multi-dimensional past self, and then also the ancestral gifts and patterns, and really the energies, right, that have supported us through really lifetimes, generations. And then if there are any planets in the fourth house, it will also give us more information to that. And obviously moon aspects too.
I love that what we're saying, and I love and thank you, because we didn't talk about that I was going to ask you that question, but when you said that, I remember being little and opening up, well, little-ish, I was 13, and opening up an astrology book, and for my moon in Gemini, it says, if you can talk about it, you're okay. And I was like, oh my God, that's so me, because I feel like if I can talk about it, if I can talk, and when we were talking about trauma, we were talking about, you lived through war, I've lived through other different wars, we've all lived through our challenges. When we're not allowed to use our voice, it'll affect our moon all very differently. And I know for me, I had to always kind of be like, no, I'm going to step up and speak. And my moon being in the 12th house, I think that at first, I had all this depth going on inside of me, all this richness and past lives and coming up in my dreams as a kid and people out of the body and all this stuff. And I was like, oh, can I share all this? And I felt that in order for my health, like you said, in order for us to tend to our health, we have to fulfill the needs of our moon, that I had to find a way to be able to communicate the soul, communicate the higher self to the world, come out of that 12th house to share it somehow, in the 10th house, right, with the North Node in Pisces. But I had to find a way. I was not going to be happy not being able to communicate that. I know that now. So I just wanted to share that with you. Yes. Yeah. And the 4th house.
Absolutely. Yeah. So the emotional, it really is, because the moon, it's always the emotional well-being, and then the sign it is in also adds another layer. So it's really, like you said, right? So it's that the connection, right, with the really the mental creativity, right, the mental well-being, and then the understanding that how connected we are if we cannot express the emotions and our mind, right? So that if we cannot express our ideas, when you have moon in Gemini, that you learned, right, is it's directly connected. But at the same time, it's served to really help you to really speak up and express yourself and connect.
Like your moon in Aquarius. So I did want to share that. So thank you for giving us these tidbits for anybody who's listening. So this is where you can begin to scratch the surface. Of course, I would love it if you actually look Milada up and take some of our courses, because, and I'm not, I'm actually not a partner or anything. It's just in terms of getting any money back from sharing her work. But I'm sharing her work authentically, because even for me, someone who's been reading and studying and doing things on my own, like, you've added a whole nother dimension. And the way that you share is from a very grounded perspective of the here and now, right? Because I find sometimes there's a lot of astrologers that are so out there. I mean, everybody has their way. But for me, somebody who's so out there all the time in the 5th dimension, well, how do I apply this wisdom now so I can live a better life now, right? In my evolutionary space, wherever I am right now. So I find that you are someone who meets people where they're at and then continues to support their evolution. So thank you. So Milada,
from my heart to yours.
Yes. So I would love to hear what is coming up for us in 2020. And I know we don't have a ton of time. We do have some time though. But I would love to just let you flow with whatever you feel like sharing, what's happening for us in terms of, I don't know, the place of healers, the place of intuition, financial, evolutionary, anything that comes to you.
Yeah. So it is, thank you very much. And once again, I'm really grateful for the opportunity to now tap into also, as you know, and I know we both operate that way, as much as there is a lot of information that's already available, right, that I've already sort of, been privy to. Anytime that I am sharing also in a particular format, there's always a specific way, right, or a specific energy that's asking to come through. So it is it's going to be a powerful year, and I know if you have listened to any of the astrology blogs and podcasts out there, right, you already are familiar with the fact that, and we can see that also sociopolitically, and also really in terms of these massive shifts that are happening, not just even on the North America, but really around the globe, right, from China, Hong Kong to in elsewhere. And so we have 3 major cycles that are playing out, and pretty much, when we say cycles, it means it's a start of a cycle. So there are alignments of two big players for each of those conjunctions that are playing out in 2020, literally from January 2020, when we have Saturn and Pluto conjunction, to then Jupiter and Pluto conjunction in May, and then we have Jupiter and Saturn conjunction at the very end, pretty much right on the solstice on December 21st, which is going to be very significant, really all three significant in a different ways. So whenever we have these big conjunctions, which are basically start of a new larger cycle that does not happen every year. So let's say Jupiter Saturn every 20 years, Saturn Pluto conjunction is basically almost every like 37 to 40 years. So we're saying these are big shifts. When you have three of them in 1 year, we know that we need to pay extra attention. We know that more will be asked of us. And then in addition to that, a lot of focus on Capricorn. And in fact, from astrology of wholeness perspective that I've been increasingly guided in the last couple of years, especially to really bring through, it really is the Cancer Capricorn polarity, which is interesting because it brings back to that part of, that martyrdom pattern, the ancestral pattern that I talked about, or even ancestral patterns, right, overall to really bring awareness to that, which is a really huge part of the work you're doing, Vanessa, which I love you so much for. And I know how huge your mission is with that, is super aligned with the energy of 2020. But it really is an understanding of how, based on our relationship, as I would say, or, we can say really based on where that Capricorn is going to be in our chart, or where that Cancer is going to be, because the eclipses, that's another part. We're going to have three big major cycles. In addition to that, we're going to have not two, but three eclipse seasons as well in the big, December, January, like literally coming up, December 26th, and then January 10th, then mid-year in June, and then we're going to have another eclipse season at the end. So it's like three big cycles, three eclipse seasons, and then we have this mega conjunction in Capricorn in January. So a big, when we talk about, interestingly enough, like a workaholic, right, pattern, or the martyrdom, that really is the Cancer Capricorn polarity. So it's going to depend on our own cosmic design, really, and I'll share a little bit about how this, we can work with this, and how we can say this will show up for healers and creatives, and really how they can work with that. But obviously, we want to keep in mind that it is going to depend on how emphasize that Capricorn energies in our chart, or even Saturn, or if we're more lunar, right? If we need a little bit more of that familial connection and safety, and so on and so forth. So the bottom line, because there's a lot of Capricorn energy, but there's a North Node in Cancer, we know that the balance we need to be aware of is like self-care needs to be in place, and it actually needs to lead the way, because the South Node is in Capricorn, along with another 4 or 5 planets come January. And then the two, right, of the major of these cycles in 2020 are going to be in Capricorn. Wow. So we know that and it's late Capricorn. So that's going to be a big, again, focus on really helping us to really see where we are, again, depending if we're more Neptunian, right? So if we're really like you could say, very healy-feely, right? Very like, oh, I just need a flow, and, Piscean or Neptunian. And that's really what we are overly, if you like, very, very attached to. And it's like, don't tell me about the goals. Don't tell me about structure, right? Again, depending on where we are on that. Obviously, nobody's, completely on the extreme. We could be on a different day, on a different, polarity. But that emphasis on, if you like, structure, and I want to say from a business perspective, operations, that's going to be really the invitation, but also understanding where we could be a little bit maybe too much focused on needing things to be, very pragmatic, or maybe a little bit too certain. Those are some of the shadow expressions of Capricorn. Now, from a socio-political perspective, it goes much deeper than that, because these cycles very much impact us collectively. And that's, in terms of really dismantling of the systems in society that really can no longer be sustained, where there are some structural changes necessary. Really, there are major structural issues that we could try and plug up those holes, right? Whether it's in the government, whether it's in the education system, whether it's in the economy, right? And the spending and all of the stuff that they're just probably in 2020, they're going to have to realize, okay, we cannot keep printing money, or we cannot keep just, extending our budgets and so on and so forth. So fiscal responsibility, right? And importantly, as I've been referring to it as the age of accountability, basically peaks in January. Yeah. It started with Saturn entering Capricorn late 2017, but really now is that peak. So collectively, we can already see how it's like really timed, right? With what's happening out there, but it's not just about Trump's impeachment or even what's happening in China and then elsewhere. How is this going to be relevant in our own businesses, in our own lives, is going to ask from us, right? That if, let's say, the previous year, if it's been all about, I need to have a big vision, I need to have the big goals, just go, right? Just like how we've been expecting the economy to continue another 10 years, kind of growing. It's changes, the sentiment changes from that exuberant optimism in terms of go growth, don't worry about, how it's impacting the environment. Don't worry about how, that's just not going to work. So, but having said that, it's also going to be relevant for in our own, for healers and creatives that have been like, oh, it's okay, we'll just go and flow, and we'll just don't worry about the structure, don't worry about the operations, you don't need to have all of these things as precise. Like that, I suspect, is going to shift, and I want to see it in a major way. Now, of course, we still need ease and grace and flow. As healers and creatives, that level of consciousness is very available to us, right? Yes. We have really a very active access to that spiritual world. And so this is where we need to stay plugged into that. So you could say for healers and creatives, it really is going to be an important time to understand, where do we need to lean more into that Saturnian 3D, let's get real here, and let's set realistic goals as well, rather than, oh, let's just double, triple, and then, let's just go for it. Because that can also be defeating in a year of realistic growth. When Jupiter is in Capricorn, where, by the way, it's not its most, the territory that very much is all about go, and expansion. It really serves us to work with that energy and say, okay, how can I really introduce this into my work, into my marketing? What is this going to mean for, my spending, any expansion that I'm planning, or even potentially, not overreaching myself this year, but at the same time, where we do need to lean into more of a results-oriented approach, right? Where we do need to actually care a little bit more about, okay, can the structure of my business, right? And so whatever that, because there are multiple layers to that, the foundational structure in my business, if my, revenue would to double, or even if it remains where it is, right? Is it sustainable?
Right.
So
thank you. And everything that you're sharing, I loved everything that you shared. I'm going to listen to it again, and I'm here nodding. So this image came to me as you were sharing this. It felt like it was this old-time cartoon in my mind, where this little kid was like, yeah, I'm going to school. But he has like the little notebooks that are wrapped with like the elastic. It's like really old-timey, right? But instead of going to school, he was hanging out by the pond, shooting stones, hanging out. And then now, forget it. Jupiter just moved in. It's Capricorn. And he gets caught. He gets spanked. And now he has to go to school and do what he has to do. I don't know. This kind of like cartoon image just jumped into my head. And I feel that that's kind of what's going to happen with, if you don't mind my share, like what came through me is what's going to happen with the healers who have been to oh, but I just gotta love, and like God's gonna bring everything, and my angels. But yes, angels are opening doors. Yes, God is bringing to you, and yes, you deserve it. And then what? How do you follow through? If you don't have a container for people to come
Yes.
through, if you don't have a system that catches the people, then you're not going to be able to reach the people in the email because you're one human and you sleep and have a life. So all of these things about we can't just chill in nirvana all the time. There's also, well, let's handle school so then we can go and hang out, right? That's kind of like the whole
Yeah,
cartoon that just,
you got it.
yeah, there's just a
That's exactly it. And then at the same time with the part of that is also just understanding that we're going to have to balance that out with taking care of our basic needs, and do we have the inner circle also that supports us on that journey. Part of that is also going to be, making sure that our, not just even the basic needs, but really the deeper emotional needs are part of that also. So if I'm setting the goal, whether it's achievable, whether it's a stretch goal for 2020, that, I'm really clear, how do I want to feel when I achieve that? And then even maybe not wait until, December 2020, as if that all needs to all just be manifested by then. Let's cultivate that emotional well-being. Let's cultivate that desired state of being. And I feel like right now, and I feel like that's what it's a bit of a paradox, because it's like that North Node in Cancer, which typically we would very much pay attention to and say, we gotta lean into that more. But with all of the focus in Capricorn, so Capricorn is also about tradition and past. And really both, this whole polarity is about looking, into the past, and sometimes in its shadow expression, it's overly attached to that. But at the same time, also realizing the gift of Capricorn is saying, okay, well, there are some lasting values. There may be some traditional values that, including, right, some of the, again, what we've either, we're bringing forth into this lifetime through the lifetimes of learning, or even through what we've really learned through our own upbringing and our culture. So in part, that's also going to be important for healers, creatives, and even other folks to honor. Because if we try and not, because really honor that, we call that a conservative principle, because it's the principle of structure and crystallization. And so yes, in our society, it has been a lot worked with by, say, the conservative forces in our society, right? Without getting into the political sort of perspective on that, but it's unavoidable. And it's important to note that, because if we try and say, oh, it's the conservatives are doing it, and it's just if we completely project that onto somebody else, then the Saturn-Pluto conjunction, that's really asking that we go deeper and really see, where do we need to honor some of, again, really what has worked really well, what we, things that have been, tried and tested that are true. And, this is in part also honoring our own tradition and getting back to that, and where we have been in avoidance of doing that. We need to tap into that to a degree, because if we don't do that, then because of the energies that are at play, then what happens is that then the conservative force in the society all of a sudden feel empowered to bring some, I don't know, draconian laws or something, hopefully not, but that's, I'm just kind of using the extreme of, so, we need to sort of work with that to the degree that, that in a way that it makes sense to us. But importantly, what I feel like is probably the most important is also recognizing the repressed misogyny that's really present, and not to even just say again, oh, it's the whomever, other people. This is relevant to all of us.
It's the structure of our world. So it's been internal.
This is very, very much, because that wherever we, it in some level, again, if we have that Cancer Capricorn emphasized in our chart, either by it's on the angles, or let's say ascendant, or even midheaven. If we have a personal planet, if we have even, let's say, maybe we may have 3 planets in Cancer, and we're like, oh, that's fine. Well, very much, it really always brings that polarity into play. So why this is important, and also coming back to healers and creatives, and then I'll summarize with that, is that we may think that as empaths that, you know, people who hate, who are like extreme, right, in resentment or, you know, anti this, anti, or, you know, hateful, that's again happening, it's like other people. Well, that's Saturn, Pluto really is going to bring, we're going to have to go deeper. Like, are you sure that's other people? Because resentment is one of the emotions, right? And its shadow expression, you could say, we're going to really have to really dig deeper and recognize where it's showing up. It's like our grumpy self, basically.
Yes.
So if you're noticing the grumpy self showing up at whatever level where it doesn't feel, you know, like you anymore, or it's just in some way doesn't feel like you want to hold on to that, we need to be willing to look at that. Because empaths, right, which is very much connected with the Cancer archetype, again, it's on that polarity where we need to be reckoned. Because again, if we don't, because Capricorn is about setting boundaries. So if, as empaths, if we don't set, it's the structure, but it's also healthy boundaries. If we don't set boundaries, what happens, right? We need to recognize that and realizing where we really need to shift that, really set better boundaries, but also not completely shield ourselves from external experiences as if it's like, oh, I just need to get, because I'm hearing some people saying, oh my God, 2020, just, you know, focus on, you know, yourself and your family and so on and so forth. Yes, we're gonna have to focus on our own needs. We're gonna have to focus on our family. We're going to have to focus on our roots, as well as how both our needs and boundaries really forever work together. And then deciding where we need to lean into one or the other, depending on what it is, you know, where our business is and what we're creating really, and what we want to be releasing and healing in 2020.
Oh, this is so powerful. I love this. I love this. So Milada, where can we find you? Where can people find you to connect with you, get a session, just do this beautiful work with you?
Yay.
Yes.
So my website is miladasaki.com. I have, I think, pretty much a basic page there where you can check out a little bit. It's been in process as I've launched a new web page there a few months ago. So I'll be adding more material, and I will be activating a blog, hopefully, fingers crossed, in the coming months, most definitely in 2020. Mostly most accessible and present, as it's just really worked really, really well for me. And I just love connecting with my community there and clients and really wider community, as well as on Facebook. So if you find me on Facebook, both my personal page, so Milada Sakic, and I have a business page as well, and there may be content variations to that I'm going to be sharing and doing a little bit differently in 2020, but though really Facebook is the best way to get in touch, and feel free to message me there if you are interested to connect, if you're interested in taking an astrology course, learning about who you are, and knowing yourself, as I like to say, knowing yourself, and then knowing your shadow, knowing really, you know, what's possible for you as well. And then I will be posting there also other ways that I'm going to be amplifying my own really platform, hopefully YouTube as well, and beyond. So email, I'm going to share. If you prefer email, you're welcome to email me at clientcare@miladasaki.com. And then once again, feel free to connect in social media as well. So
Thank you. Thank you, Milada. We'll have you back at some point to talk more deeply when we're in the muck of 2020 or flowing easily to hear more about what happens in the next half of the year. So thank you so much for dropping some beautiful star wisdom and bringing your joy, your love, and your truth. And thank you, everybody, for listening. Please reach out to her. She's an amazing soul sister and wise woman. And we will connect here again. Thank you, Milada. Thank you, everyone.
thank you, Vanessa, and everyone. Big, big hugs and many blessings.